Utsu etsu. They will plot plots. Visufar. They'll be nullified. Dabru davar. They're going to speak lots of words. Velo yakum. Not going to happen. Ki imanu kel. Because God is with us. And since the war, since a certain point in the war, when I say it at the end of davening, I say it with a lot of intention. I can't say how good the rest of my davening is. I might space out a bit. But when I come to that line, hopefully I space in. Reflections on what's going on in Israel and really strengthening the spiritual brigade, because as time goes on, it's easy to, unfortunately, horrifically view things as status quo. And we would never want to view something like this as, yeah, status quo, that's what's going on. And it's, of course, for us in Chicago, dimly in the background. No. We keep reminding ourselves. We keep staying focused. A lot of different points. And of course, we all hear a lot. We're all bombarded with a lot. And I try to sort through everything and see the spiritual messages that I want to share. With the return of the hostages, we saw again, and it's just so important for us to remember this because it's so easy to fall into another space, but how God is really the director of everything. I wanted to share two little vignettes of two of the children. One was a little girl, Emily Hand. When she was taken, they didn't know, like for many of them, many people they thought were taken hostage were killed. Many people they thought were killed were taken hostage. I mean, it was obviously very unclear as they were sorting through the bodies and like sometimes literally the fingerprints to try to identify who were these people. In the beginning, when they weren't sure she was alive, they bought a letter. We've spoken several times about the idea of buying a letter in a Sefer Torah written for protection. Sefer Torah for children, special Sefer Torah, and of course Sefer Torahs for adults, where the idea of the letter in the Sefer Torah is protection. And I've shared many stories about the protection the Sefer Torah affords. They bought a letter for her. And they found out she was a hostage, and then she was released. She was released on Parshas Vayetze. The letter that she got in the Torah was Parshas Vayetze. And very similarly, a child, Yagel Yaakov, got out on the 53rd day of his captivity, and his name is in Tehillim in chapter 53. So why am I sharing this? What's the point in this? What did I see as the point in these ideas? I think it's to show us, to remind us, to demonstrate it's all God. Every single detail, down to the day of your release, as we see in these two incidents. Every single detail. And we can't forget that. And we have to really cling to that thought. We have to take strength from that thought because it's a reassurance. It's a comfort. And it's very easy otherwise to fall into very logical, plausible, realistic fears based on what's going on now. And we have to remember that Jewish people aren't logical. We're godly. For God, it's all possible. So I really looked at these ideas and many other ideas similar to them as like, on one hand, it's a sign. It's all God. God's running the show. The stuff we love, the stuff we don't like at all, both and all and everything in between, it's all precisely Him. Doesn't mean we understand it. That doesn't mean we love it, but we know it's all Him. And the second idea that I think is a corollary of that is that spiritual reality creates the physical. So seemingly, he was released on the 53rd day because his name is in the 53rd chapter of Tehillim. And she got out on Parshas Vayetze. That was because of the power of the letter she had in the Sefer Torah on that parsha. So our spiritual creates our physical. Sorry, I just want to shut this dinging thing on my computer. Down with the dings. And I think that's so important for us to understand that relationship between the spiritual and the physical. And every miracle, and of course there's so many miracles, and hopefully we're all seeing and hearing and watching and sharing the miracles. They all echo these themes. There are many miracles I've heard. I don't share them all. I share a few that resonate with me or that I know the source and I feel comfortable sharing it. A miracle that really resonated, people heard it a while ago, but I really related to it, was the miracle with that tuna can. The reason why I really related to it was because my sons do the exact same thing. They do it with a sardine can. They picked it up in yeshiva. You light fire to it. It's so cool. All the oil burns. It becomes smoked and much tastier. So the tuna can miracle, if you forgot, was as this soldier opening up this not very edible, as I'm told all army rations are not very edible, tuna can. He does what they always do, lights a match to it, and everyone starts screaming at him, there's live fire here. You can't start a fire. And he quickly throws it, and with the hand of God, threw it right down a Hamas tunnel where this inflamed tuna can with all that oil burning started igniting all the live fire they had in that tunnel. And the terrorists that were there came out with their hands up. So it resonated with me because I know the trick. But more deeply, it gave me, and when I heard it, I think I really needed it to hear it. It gave me a lot of reassurance. Because I looked at it like, here are these terrorists. They're planning, they're plotting. They see the soldiers. They're going to come out. They're going to start shooting. And you know what? There's a God. And that concept I really need to remember. And I really took strength from this story in remembering that concept. Whatever they're planning, whatever they're plotting, I don't know, but I know they're planning and plotting. There's a God. And I related it to the verse that we say at the end of our davening. Utsu eitza v'sufar, dabru davar v'lo yakum. It's from Yeshaya, as many of those strong lines are. And it's saying, Utsu eitzu, they will plot plots. V'sufar, they'll be nullified. Dabru davar, they're going to speak lots of words. V'lo yakum, not going to happen. Ki imanu kel, because God is with us. And since the war, since a certain point in the war, when I say it at the end of davening, I say it with a lot of intention. I can't say how good the rest of my davening is. I might space out a bit. But when I come to that line, hopefully I space in. Where do we know the power of that line from? It's a verse, okay, but there's a lot of verses. So it actually connects to the story of Purim. As you might know, the Midrash, that when everything was seemingly falling apart and genocide was very real, and Mordechai didn't know what way it was going to turn, so he stopped 3 school children, 3 boys coming home from Cheder, from school. And he asked each one of them, tell me a verse you learned today. And the 3 verses are all, this one being one of them, all expressing this idea of victory is ours. God is with us and victory is ours. And when Mordechai heard this, it was what's called a nevuah ketana, a version of prophecy, a minor prophecy. And he knew it was going to work out in our favor. And since then, we use this line, specifically this line. I mean, there were 3, but we use specifically this line, Utsu eitza v'sufar, dabru davar v'lo yakum, ki imanu kel, to express the destruction of the enemy. That's why I focus on it, because I really want God to destroy the enemy. There's so many miracles, as we're saying, so many that we're not privy to. We don't hear them. People aren't talking about them. My cousin's son, I think I mentioned, just got out of Gaza, fighting there for like 6 weeks. He said every day there were miracles. Every day there were miracles. That's how they survived. A friend of mine's mother is a therapist in Israel and a healer, and she drives all the way from where she lives to where the soldiers are outside of Gaza to give them therapy, to give them healing. And she said every day she hears miracles. And she asks everyone, tell me the miracle. She writes them down. She said she doesn't know if she's allowed to share them now, though I've heard a few, but she writes them down. She says for the time when she's able to share them all. There's a lot of miracles. A lot of miracles are classified, like by the Gulf War, when the miracles of the Gulf War, the real miracles, came declassified later, and then we really knew the miracles. So here's a miracle that was classified when it happened, but has been declassified since, so I can share it. This was with someone from Chabad, which is why I know the story. This is a man who is in the reserves, the Miluim, in Israel as a commander. He would, when October 7th came, he was right up called for duty, and he's in charge of a certain area, like, Gaza-ish area, where he has a group of soldiers there. He got a call on Friday, 2 weeks into the war, meaning 2 weeks after October 7th. It was Friday. Now, in his office, which I imagine is like some type of tent, but in his office, there's the regular phone, and then there's a red phone. And the red phone is for extreme situations. So you hope the red phone never rings. So this is Friday, 2 weeks after October 7th, and the red phone rang. And he's terrified before he picks it up, because he knows if the red phone's ringing, it's probably not to tell him good news. He picked it up, and the news he received was the Iron Dome fell. Don't tell anyone. That's why this was a classified story. Don't tell anyone, but put your soldiers on high alert, but don't tell them what happened. And he doesn't know what to do. Obviously, he cannot tell his soldiers. First of all, he was just told not to. And second of all, they'll have a complete panic attack. Because what does this mean, the Iron Dome fell? Iron Dome was erected when the Israeli government, for purely political reasons, forced the expulsion of 10,000 Jews and gave the Arabs lands that we call now Gaza. They knew then, even though they, for their own political agendas, gave them this land, they knew, obviously, that it's going to be very dangerous. So the deal was that America gave the technology for the Iron Dome. And the Iron Domes are ultimate protection, because if they shoot rockets, if they shoot missiles, the Iron Dome hopefully intercepts them. But now the Iron Dome was down. Hamas at that time was shooting easy 100 rockets a day. And most of them, the Iron Dome shot down. Most of them fell back into Gaza, but Hamas doesn't really care, as we've learned many times over about the civilians, so it didn't make a difference to Hamas. They're in the tunnels, missiles are exploding, great. We just have more stuff for our propaganda machine. But the Iron Dome was down, which meant every rocket that would be shot would hit its target. He didn't even know what to tell soldiers, duck. It's very, very hard. He had enormous tension, and he kept on almost like like when you think you're going to hear something, you don't hear it, you don't want to hear it, but you keep thinking you're hearing it. Like, is that the sound of a missile? Is that the sound of a missile? And that's how his Friday afternoon went. Became Shabbos. He's Chabad, a religious Jew, so he had someone that gives him a break at a certain point Friday night that he can go and daven. So he went and he davened Friday night, and he was the whole time praying, at least he didn't want any missiles to fall when he was away from his men. At least he should be with his men if the missiles are going to fall on them. He comes back and no missiles fell. He's waiting. He's nervous. No missiles fell. He got finally the all clear sign, meaning the red phone rings again, and they say the Iron Dome is back up. 15 minutes on his watch, Hamas sent 50 missiles to Israel. During the entire day when the dome was down, he's paying a lot of attention, there were exactly 2 missiles that Hamas shot. One went to an area called Sufka, where it hit totally empty land, nothing there at all. And one went to an area called Nir Yitzchak, where it hit a building and there was property damage, but not one person was there, not one person was hurt. 15 minutes after the Iron Dome is up, the missiles are raining on southern and central Israel. If those 50 missiles had been shot 20 minutes earlier, can't imagine the loss of life that would have happened. God protects. These miracles, we don't know they're happening. They happen all the time. Smaller one, but for the people involved, of course, it's not small, it's their life. This was Erev Hanukkah, and these were soldiers in the north where the Hezbollah terrorists are always trying to infiltrate. Now, of course, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And some terrorists came through and the soldiers shot, and they neutralized them. So now they're going, as is the protocol, to take the bodies. What they didn't know was that they didn't shoot the terrorists. They shot, but they didn't hit them. It was a setup, and the terrorists were waiting to ambush them when they would come to get their bodies. So these soldiers are they're like 4 soldiers, innocently going to get the 3 bodies that are neutralized, but weren't. And as they're almost there, suddenly an animal darted out. And the terrorists, when they saw this movement, panicked or didn't realize or thought it was the soldiers, and they started shooting, which let the soldiers realize that these terrorists are not dead, they're alive, and they saved their own lives, and they managed to kill all the terrorists. Again, a huge miracle. You say, yeah, and there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. But for these 4 soldiers and their mothers and their wives and their children, this is life or death. So there's so many miracles. And sometimes we don't hear about the miracles because we don't even realize. It says, Ein bal hanes makir beniso. It's a very strong saying of our sages that very often the person who's experiencing the miracle doesn't even know about. We're not even privy to it. I think about that sometimes in my own life. Do I even know all the miracles, all the kindnesses, all the special things that God does for me that I'm not properly thanking him because maybe I didn't even realize it. So this is a crazy story. This was a soldier in Gaza, and he was on a break, as they every once in a while let the soldiers out for a few hours or a night. And of course, the most exciting thing, just like for some of our children or some of us, is they get back their cell phones. Because when you're in Gaza, you do not have your cell phone. I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures of the soldiers when they're coming out, and they all are grabbing in that cell phone box for their cell phone. So he gets his cell phone. He's chilling. He's on his phone. He's doing what every, typical person of probably his age does. He went on social media. And he went on Twitter. And of course, Twitter is, where Hamas pours its propaganda. And he started watching. Now, I don't know. I have, thank God, never seen one thing that Hamas has put out since October 7th, and I don't plan on seeing anything. I don't believe I've ever gone on Twitter in my life either, and I don't plan on it. But different age, different stage. He wanted to check out, let's know what the enemy's saying. So he's watching literally the videos that Hamas are putting out as part of their constant daily bombardment of propaganda. And he's seeing in one video how a Hamas terrorist, a sniper, sets his eyes, so to speak, the eyes of his gun on an Israeli soldier and shoots. And he's watching the video and he's, wait a minute, you know, regular little video, except the soldier that's being shot is himself. He's like, what? That's me. Like, I recognize myself. That's me. I don't know what I was that I was, where the terrorist was hiding, that he was able to shoot at me, but the video stops him. So of course the viewers assume an Israeli soldier neutralized. But hey, he's that Israeli soldier. He doesn't know what happened. The bullet missed. I don't know, missed so wildly I didn't even know the story. I didn't even know I was in the sights of a sniper. I didn't even know I'm on video as a dead soldier. I didn't even know till I see this video the miracles God is doing for me and for all of us all the time. What about in our own lives? Have you had this type of experience where something happens and, I mean, I'm sure not as dramatic, but something happens and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize how God like orchestrated the whole thing for me. Anyone had that type of experience? Well, I definitely have. I definitely have had situations where like, I'm like, not during, so of course during I don't realize, but afterwards I'm like, whoa. And I see all the little details that lined up and how God orchestrated everything for me. And it's very powerful moments. Those aha moments are very powerful. And as I said, they're very reassuring. And simcha as well. They're just like, you feel like you're taken care of, like you're really being taken care of. And that's good to tuck away in your pocket for all the times you might not feel so taken care of. Same God. Same love, same taken care of. And I hope it's not just me and it's not just Simcha. I hope everyone here has had those experiences, and maybe you have and you're forgetting. Maybe you have and you didn't realize. I am sure we all have. Oh, and Dina realizes too. Dina says, yes, me too. I am sure we have all had those types of experiences where we didn't even realize. And then at the end, we look back and we're like, whoa, everything just lines up. And look what God was doing for me. I highly recommend, while we happen to be talking about this subject, to make this practical. I'm sure I've given you this recommendation before, but sometimes, you hear it like 10 times and then you listen or not. Maybe the 11th. If you use a computer, make a Word doc, or you're on your phone, make a notes, or on a paper, take a notebook. And write down the miracles. I think it is such a powerful movement in our service of God to write down our personal miracles. I keep it on my computer. It's entitled Miracles. and I use it. I mean, one reason why I think it's important to write them down is acknowledging God and thanking him. And the more we thank, the more God can open up the channels for more. It's also bringing it into a concrete reality. Words, written words, spoken words, make something very concrete and affect the physicality of the world. And also, most pragmatically, when I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, a bit like I got way too much falling apart in my life, I reread. It's very accessible. It's right on my computer desktop. And I reread and I read and I read until I feel centered, until I feel taken care of, until I feel confident that just as all these other times, so too now, it's all God. Dina.
Mrs. Turin, I think that you recommended this in a class, and I'm not sure if it was this one, but before. And I actually, after like hearing it a few times from you, I did it, and it has been so incredibly helpful in like regulating the feelings, the constant overwhelm, the constant like if there's anxiety of getting everything done throughout the day, or how is this possibly gonna come all together in the way that it needs to. And then thinking back to the like data, quote unquote, of my life, and like Hashem has not only worked it out, but worked it out so that the outcome is far better than I even realized, is so, so helpful to be like, it's never failed so far. So how could it this
Exactly.
time?
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And I guess what Dina said just reassured me that I should never feel bad giving the same thing again and again and again, because sometimes we need to hear it 5 times, 10 times, 15 times. And then it's like, maybe I should try it. I think she said it a few times. I'm so glad. That was a commercial. I appreciate the commercial. It was a beautiful commercial, said far better than I could say it. And everyone could be like Dina and make a Word doc or write it on your notes in your phone or take a beautiful notebook. And just at a certain point, I actually, because I don't remember how old I was when I started this. I don't remember. I've had it for many years, but 10 years, does that mean? 20 years, does that mean? 25 years, does that mean? 30 years, does that mean? I don't know. I don't know. But at a certain point, I said, all right, let me try to remember all the miracles that I had before I started writing them down. Because I want to add those too. Because I just want to have as many as possible to just feel like in love with God. Because so loved by God, enthralled by the relationship, enthralled by how he's, like Dina said, never failed yet in all the details. And if you say, well, I haven't really had so many miracles, we all have. You just have to think, try to remember and think about them. Anyway, speaking of miracles, of Hashem's love for us and of our response, also, there's so many stories that are similar to the story I'm going to say, but each story is a human being. Each story is a life. Each story is a father, is a son, is a brother, is a spouse. And each one, I think, really highlights this point. So this was one of the many soldiers that October 7th in the morning, Saturday morning, got called up and sent down south. That he's fighting in the south in an area where he was very, very outnumbered. The soldiers were very outnumbered by the terrorists at that point, as unfortunately happened in the beginning. And unfortunately, many soldiers fell. October 7th and October 8th, a relative of a relative of mine fell then, and many did because totally unprepared for what was going on. So this soldier got hit very severely in his back. It hit a main artery. He was severely wounded, and he was just bleeding to death. Or would Hamas get him first before even that happened? He knew he had a tourniquet in his left pocket, but the injury was on the left side, so he couldn't reach the pocket, and he just was lying on the ground. And he saw there was like a structure, a type of monument, a little close. And he was thinking if he could get under that monument, the terrorists wouldn't see him. Now, of course, he's probably still going to end up bleeding to death, but he had to try. So he rolled till he got under that monument, and then he got under it, and then he lost consciousness. And when he lost consciousness, he had, as they say, near-death experience, out-of-body experience, whatever the lingo is for it. And he said he just felt enveloped by pure love. And he was thinking, I'm not so perfect. I'm not so religious. Why do I deserve this? Why am I so beloved? He felt so loved. He's like, what have I done in my life to deserve this love? And he just felt completely embraced by this love. And he knew he's dying. He understood. His soul was leaving his body, and he felt all this love, and it felt really good. You look down on your body, and that does not look good, and this feels much better. But he knew, I have a family. No, I got to go back. I'm needed. And he just had this very strong thought, I have to go back. I have to go back to my family. And the next thing he knew, he regained consciousness, and he's on the hard concrete under this monument, bleeding to death. But he had like a new surge of strength, and he managed to get out the tourniquet. He managed to stop the bleeding, and he was just lying there. And as he was lying there, more and more soldiers did the same thing that were wounded. They crept or crawled or got under this area, hoping that the terrorists wouldn't notice them. And they just lay there very quiet. He laid there with these soldiers for over 8 hours. And during those 8 hours, at many points, he felt he was dying again, but he was like, no, they brought me back. He said, I'm going to survive this because, like, if he was supposed to die, he would have died before. So he knew he was going to survive, though it was very unbearable. And I mean, there's more details that I'm not going to go into because the story is long. But bottom line, a helicopter came, and he managed to get into the helicopter. And he and every single soldier that was with him under that monument, they all survived. And now, and this is, of course, the point that I wanted to emphasize, though to me the whole story was so emotional, now he's rethinking his life. And he said, like, he always believed. If anyone would ask him, he would say, of course, he believes in a God. But he didn't believe in a way that he acted differently because of that belief. He believed. We're Jewish. The sages say all Jews are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, which means we're all believers, the children of believers. We all believe. But that belief does not necessarily impact our actions. Well, why not? If I'm a believer, then I should, live like God wants. But being that we're human, we sort of know it doesn't always work out that way. And what's really happening is that we sometimes have a disconnect and our belief becomes very peripheral. It's there. I will defend it. Have no doubts about it. But it's peripheral and doesn't change my actions. In the Talmud, it discusses this concept. And the Talmud says that a Jewish thief, before he goes to steal, he prays to God to be successful. I should have a good, successful evening at work. And the question is, wait a minute. If you believe in God, why are you stealing? And if you don't believe in God, why are you praying? And the answer is, no, he's a Jew. Ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. Of course he believes. But belief itself could be very amorphous. It doesn't necessarily change your actions. We have to take our belief and internalize it. We work on it. Emunah is from the root word emunim, which means, if you know modern Hebrew, exercises. We have to exercise our belief. We have to practice with our belief by talking about it, by sharing it with others, by studying about it, by demanding action in connoissance with it. And that's how we take this amorphous, perhaps detached from our reality, feeling awareness and make it real and live a different life because of it. So this soldier was saying that he always believed in God, but now he really believes. That's how he translates his experience. He believes completely. And now he's committed to living a different life. He's still recovering. He's still in the hospital. But he's committed to living a different life because of it. And that's a very powerful message for all of us because, again, we all believe. And none of us want to go through these experiences to have something happen to completely deepen our relationship with God. But on our own, we believe, and then we can challenge ourselves and say, well, if I believe, why? And then you can fill in the dots and then think, okay, well, it's not enough to believe. I've got to live that belief. They call like cardiac Jewry. To have all these good Jewish feelings in your heart is beautiful, but it's not enough. It has to get from the heart to the actions. How does it get from the heart to the actions? When it's strong enough in the heart, then it translates to the actions. And that's our service. I think just like we saw so many examples, and everything I'm sharing are examples of how much God loves us and how much God is doing for us. There's also so many, many unbelievable stories of how much we love each other. And I think that's an amazing thing that came out since October 7th. Just like yesterday. Yes, it was yesterday. Was speaking with some people about the rally in Washington. The numbers made no sense. How many people showed up? Unbelievable, beyond any wildest fantasies of the organizers. It's a testimony to how much we love each other. And there was so many things that happened on October 7th that really showed people's love and self-sacrifice for each other. I want to share one story. There's a man, October 7th, heard what happened, and he said, I'm going down to help. Now, of course, all over Israel right away, they heard what happened. The news outlets got it faster than the army got there, that's for sure. But not so many people jumped into their cars and ran down. But this man did, and he reached out to his brother, and he said, I'm coming with you. So these two brothers, Elimelech and Menachem, They drove down to Be'eri, to the kibbutz that, in a sense, was hit the hardest of all of them. As they were driving near the kibbutz, they found an abandoned army jeep, which means an army jeep where the soldiers didn't make it. They took the jeep because obviously it was more protection than their car. And for 14 hours, they were rescuing people in the kibbutz. What does that mean, they were rescuing people? It means they got into the kibbutz and they started going into the houses and finding the safe rooms, knocking on the doors and convincing the people to come out. The people didn't believe them. I mean, as of course, they had a very good right not to believe them because the Arabs were also knocking on doors and trying to get the people to come out. And they were saying Shema. They were singing the songs of Simchas Torah. Meaning it took time. Time, every minute ticking. Every minute a terrorist could walk in and start blowing them all up. And they did this house by house. These two brothers rescued over 100 people. Meaning they filled up the Jeep, drove it to a safer area, found a place where they unloaded the people, and thank God all those people that they rescued did survive. And they went back, and they did it again. And they went back, and they did it again. And they did this for 14 hours. After 14 hours, Elimelech went into a house to do the same thing, and there was a terrorist there, and he shot and killed him. And to me, this was so incredible because, of course, gradually after October 7th, more and more stories came out, stories we've heard and we've shared. It's an incredible power an individual has, especially when that individual is a Jew. And I heard of people driving down and rescuing people, and every single story I heard like that blew my mind. But every other story I heard besides this one, there was still something there that you were like, okay. And I think the first story I heard was of a grandfather who drove down to a kibbutz and rescued the kibbutz and rescued his son and rescued his grandchildren. But this grandfather was professional army, and he was rescuing his son and his grandchildren. I heard, and I believe shared, of parents that went down and found their son and 5 of his friends. Incredible story, incredible clear miracle story. But again, this is the love of parents for their child, that they did something crazy and suicidal for their child. There was, of course, a story many people have told of, I don't think we shared it in this class, of a young man in the army who went down and rescued, but he's professional army. The one that was saved by his tzitzis. Army people. There were many army people that were called up that day, and there were army people that just went down, including Druzim. There were Druzim that went down. There were Arab soldiers, Arab Israeli soldiers that went down. They were very, very helpful, the Druzim and the Arab soldiers, because they managed to trick Hamas and kill off a number of terrorists by pretending they were one of them. Again, these were, though, their army. There's a farmer in that area of the festival who lives fairly close and knew the festival area perfectly because he used to have like a farm there. And he also, crazy, amazing, made like 10 trips to the area of the festival and saved over 150 people, which is amazing. But he does live right there and he does know the area very well. And here's a man who's not army, who did not go for his relatives, who didn't have any connection to the land or the area. He went to a kibbutz. He did not know the people, and he saved people for 14 hours, going in and out of this most dangerous kibbutz to save people he totally didn't know. But it's his family. It's fellow Jews. And I was like, wow, what a testimony to what a person can do. Because of him, there's over 100 people alive today. And in a sense, what a person should do, how a person should act, that is the natural response. And that makes sense that that's how we behave. On a very different level, but I took it also as an expression of the same love. This I just happened to see today. And I Googled a little. I always dig a little to try to get a better understanding of the story. But this Olympic gold medalist from Israel, who who's now auctioning off his gold medal. You never think of these things as having worth beyond all their gold medal worth, but it's actually worth about $100,000. And he's willing to sell it because he wants to take that money and use it to help the people from the South that were displaced, whose homes were destroyed, were burnt to the ground, whose businesses are destroyed. You have 250,000 such people now in Israel. He's going to hold on to a gold medal? He'd rather have $100,000 to help these people. And I was also very touched by that because you look at him. I did see, and but so what's what does it mean he's a world champion if the people in his country are hurting? That's much, 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 much more important. I could go on and on and on. I think we all could. But I hope the point I'm trying to say, as I call this strengthening the spiritual brigades, is really, we all know these stories. It's possible that every single thing I said tonight, you knew, maybe. But I want us to think about them and to really, really extract this sense of God, this sense of his love, this awareness that it's all him, and this sense of our own power. Who are we? What does it mean to be a Jew? What powers we each have embedded inside ourselves. Every Jew's a hero. Every Jew has such power. And each one in our own situation to utilize those powers, to really say, I can and must and will also make that difference. Thank you so much for joining, and we should have an amazing week, and we should hear and see far more spectacular than anything we've experienced so far. Far, far, far more. Thank you so much for joining.